Welcome to Moral Lit, a channel dedicated to literary discussions and deep dives where we focus on the Unseen Operative series by me, A.L. Lieske, and discuss the human condition around us. In these podcasts, we will be looking at sections from my own literature as well as the literature of others in order to elaborate on these conditions and to kind of describe things that we all relate to. We hope that you'll enjoy this podcast. Stick around and subscribe. And we're going to have a little discussion about rights, justices, freedom, a little bit about accountability and honesty. We hope that you enjoy this episode. So for today's discussion, we're going into chapter 2, which is called Onboarding. And this is on page 25 of the original version. Pretty sure it would be 26 in the newer, updated version. But second paragraph from the bottom, just to set the context. Azure Prescott, at this point, is getting onboarded as a full agent. She's meeting her partner, Alma Morales, and she's getting a little talking to by Stanley Lucas, the compliance head, or compliance division head of the Bureau in Pittsburgh, as well as discussing things with Dr. Williams and Chief Haynes. So the speaker in this is Stanley Lucas. And our first point is going to come from the first two paragraphs. I'll just read the portion that we're going to be discussing today, and then we'll break it up by the different points that we want to discuss. So, just before I do that, I am here with my husband today. His name is Zach. Mm-hmm. He is a YouTuber. He runs fantastic videos with his brothers, so definitely check out his channel. And he's going to give some insights without having read the book, so this will be kind of fresh. All right, so starting on that paragraph. Perhaps you might agree, he continued, his eyes substantive, that nobody has the right to deceive, infringe upon the freedoms of others, or withhold crucial information that could determine innocence or guilt. In such matters, measures as this ensure justice is preserved and prevent further harm to society. Azure nodded slowly. Well was she acquainted with abuses found throughout society, particularly in the foster care system in which she had been raised. Many of her peers and circumstantial siblings had informed her of the cruelties of abuses, kept all too quiet to provide stability and keep a family afloat. Too frequently it seemed that justice had to be put on hold via silence for survival. Then on the next level came ethics. Ethics, indeed, spoke as the warnings on medicine labels. You have been prescribed this medication because your doctor believes the benefits outweigh the potential side effects. Use as directed. No one had a right to obscure truth from justice, and yet society was prevalent in the very act of it. This reflection weighed heavily on Azure as she contemplated Mr. Lucas's question about moral liberties and the greater good of society. Justice stands as a guiding principle of federal jurisdiction, Azure began, her voice carrying a subtle depth, reflective of her feelings. No one has the right to withhold the truth that could harm others if left unspoken. Society ultimately benefits when all crimes are brought to light, regardless of the immediate consequences for those involved. The sooner the truth is revealed, the sooner healing can begin. This is why she worked hard to join the Bureau, to bring hidden pain to light, to promote healing. Indeed, justice often comes with a bittersweet taste. Acting rightly often did bring temporary suffering, even to the innocent. Nonetheless, despite short-term challenges it may pose, doing what is right remains unequivocally necessary for securing the long-term welfare of all parties involved. So, quite a couple paragraphs there. But we're just going to kind of start with the first two, which is perhaps you might agree that no one has the right to deceive, infringe upon the freedoms of others, or withhold crucial information that could determine innocence or guilt. Again, she had mentioned that she had known abuses that had been kept quiet to provide stability and keep a family afloat, and that too frequently justice seemed to be put on hold via silence for survival. So that is going to be our first talking point, is nobody has the right to deceive or infringe on justice, and yet some people do, to keep silence in situations wherein they perceive that it will help their family stay afloat. Mm-hmm. So just reading those, what are your first thoughts, Zach?
I guess one thing that comes to mind, and we can cut this out if you don't want to talk about it, but it just seems like a pretty strong echo to your history, some of the things that happened in your past with abuse, and it's definitely a pattern that you see in a lot of places, in a lot of ways. There's so many people that find themselves I guess, stuck, because that temporary moment of what you might call scandal or a reflection of the people that you're interacting with can sometimes be a bit of a struggle to deal with the emotions of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually there's a very interesting situation that has actually come to light recently, where two people who were part of a really large YouTube channel. So it was a guy cheated on his wife. It was a very public affair, and so he was kicked from the YouTube channel, and all the other guys that were working on it, said he's no longer part of this or whatever, and the person he was cheating with also got fired because they were all working together or whatever, and he made the dumbest decision to start a podcast with his wife, and then they were hashing out their grievances 3 years later after the separation.
My goodness.
And he was just all this deflection, and it was just weird. It was just weird. A weird situation that has happened. But she would call it the affair that you committed. He would say the scandal. It's like he was trying to separate this. In my mind, he was trying to separate the things he did, which were wrong, from the reality that he hurt his wife. His wife is still hurting, and it's weird that they agreed to come together and record them talking about that publicly. That's so weird. It just makes me cringe a lot. But I think people are trying to separate what they do wrong, but they're also trying to see what other people do wrong, and they try to deflect and find just other things that are just, I don't know what you'd say. There's a certain amount of dishonesty that people are willing to go for in order to protect themselves and others. Mm-hmm. And that's, to a lot of people, it's really gross, but yet we find ourselves doing that a lot, unintentionally or very intentionally.
Yeah. So that is actually, it's kind of a point I wanted to talk a little bit more on too. Like, you're hitting it really well, is even though none of us has the right to obscure justice anyway, yet it's prevalent in society because we do. Those very facts. We like to separate, like you're saying, and we like to justify ourselves in the mannerisms that we're doing it. One of which is, again, for security, for safety. We think that we're doing the right thing for others around us by obscuring this thing when it's not. It is actually, I did want to allude a little bit to my family situation. Part of the reason that I wrote this is from personal experience. Mm-hmm. Having grown up with a biological father who was abusive in multiple ways to me and my family, we had lived for years up until my older sister and I were in college, obscuring the fact that he was abusive from public, putting on a show whenever we were about church, his job, even in like the public sphere of school, because that's, we were trying to protect ourselves. In our heads, it was a survival mechanism, and we didn't talk about it even with each other. Like, to this day, we kind of get together sometimes and we talk about, oh, he did this and he did that, and we're shocked what each other has experienced because we thought by us keeping silent, the problem was being restrained to ourselves and not the other members of the family, that we were protecting the public, that we were protecting, the stability of the home, because that's just so important. And yet, in reality, looking back on that situation, had any one of us spoken out sooner, it would have been better. Yeah. We didn't have that right to obscure that justice. And now, because we held it in so long, he's walking off scotch-free. The law can't do very much once, I'm no longer a minor. None of my siblings are a minor, so we can't report minor abuse and have the law do anything about it. Yeah. It's after the fact. So we weren't acting properly according to law, and yet we justified it because of that sense of security. And so in this book, the fact that this is said by Stanley Lucas in the second chapter is really prominent because it comes back to play later in a character known as Isabel, who is a Filipina, married to what is a missing Italian agent. And she goes through a series of withholding truth from all of those who are trying to help her within the law, even from her own husband. Why? Because she's trying to have some sense of security. And her situation is dire enough that even if, she came forward right away, things were looking really bad for her in the end, and they don't end up so well. But she has all these maternal reasons for keeping it quiet, for keeping it secure, and yet justice-wise, it's not right. So it's just kind of a little exploration for us all to kind of reflect on, when am I withholding justice because it's preserving some sort of control or stability in my life that I think is there, even if it might not be.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's really intriguing to see so many people explain away their behaviors instead of taking just straight accountability. One thing that bothers me is how often people will pretend to admit fault, but instead they're just deflecting the whole time. And it's really hard when you have to admit that you did something that was unsavory or untoward, and you have to go back and fix it and make it better. I feel really guilty if I'm at work and I'm really frustrated, and then I maybe raise my voice, or I am a little sassy or bossy to someone. It doesn't take me very long to realize that was really not appropriate. And I always go back and I tell the person, like, this is nothing personal. It's a stressful day, and we make up and we make it better. But my goodness, is it crazy how often people just I'm getting a lot better at controlling my own emotions, and that's one thing I'm actually really grateful for my current job. But because that's really helped with that, being able to just let things go that are minute. But so many people withhold valuable information. It's another thing is that when it comes to communication, if we're communicating with someone, if I'm telling you that everything's okay, but it's really not, that's hurting both of us in our relationship, whether it's a working relationship, our marriage, or whatever else. If we're not communicating properly, if something is hurting us or if something is helping us, and we're not really going to grow, as well as it's only going to make our relationship more strained, and people tend to dehumanize each other instead of grow together.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, that again reminds me way back of my family situation. Is my silence I thought was protecting my mother. I thought it was protecting my sister. My sister was likewise. I see that she was trying to protect me, my mother, and my brothers, and I look at her as a hero for that. But at the same time, it's like we didn't realize that we were unintentionally permitting the abuse to perpetuate because of that silence. Nobody ever knows the effect that is being had on others because of their choices, because we're quite myopic when we're in those spheres. Because like you said, nobody wants to be wrong. I didn't want to be called out as wrong for saying I think my dad is doing something bad, and then be told, you're wrong, because he was a completely different person everywhere else. Like, to this day, many people believe he was this genuinely fantastic person, and in some ways he was, but that doesn't change the reality of how bad things were at home. Even so, I didn't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to protect others, and it's still hurting them. So yeah, and in the book, that goes to Isabel too. She doesn't realize that she's perpetuating harm on others by holding the silence. So that is a very important thing, which kind of leads into our next point, which comes in the latter paragraphs, where Azure said, society ultimately benefits when all crimes are brought to light, regardless of the immediate consequences for those involved. The sooner the truth is revealed, the sooner the healing can begin. Mm-hmm. Yes, acting rightly often did bring temporary suffering even to the innocent. Nevertheless, despite the short-term challenges it may pose, doing what is right remains unequivocally necessary for securing the long-term welfare of all parties involved. I think that's something as society we don't like to consider in our personal situations how that is true, but we'll easily admit on paper that yes, the sooner that justice and truth is brought to light, the sooner the healing can begin. Common sense. You don't want to leave a thorn in there and then claim, yeah, my skin's just going to heal around it and I'll be totally fine. Even though when I'm older, 60 or whatever, and the weather's bothering me, I'm going to feel that thorn in there. It's going to bother me and aggravate more, and it might even get infected. Like, you don't leave the thorn in there. You've got to take it out for the healing to start. Mm-hmm. But when we're in the midst of a situation like abuse, just so many injustices that occur in government and institutions, in school, sometimes in work. Being with humans is a messy work. Mm-hmm. Having relationships with others is a messy work. And so when we're in the thick of these situations, it doesn't feel like telling the truth or bringing things to light is going to start any healing whatsoever. In fact, it feels quite the opposite. Like, if I confront you for doing something wrong, it's going to ruin our friendship. It's going to ruin our relationship. It's going to ruin this perfect balance that we have now. I better just keep quiet and let it fester, even though at the end of the day, like at the root of it, there can be no healing as long as the festering continues.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Even sometimes really small things added up on top of each other can cause a lot of issues. That's where a lot of new marriages and new relationships, some people even, if they move in together and they're getting used to each other, there are little things that'll build up. There are little things that'll take away from the true magic of having a partner. Mm-hmm. And it can really tear apart like you said, that perfect image, or one partner is really bothered by just some of the little things that can, ruin the peace in the home, so to speak. And that happens at work. If there's little things at work that people are doing that really frustrate you, the last thing you need to do is behind their back tell everybody that they're just the most inconsiderate, worst jerk in the whole world. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to think that about your partner. You don't want to think that about other people. If something's bothering you, even if it's small, if you have a civil conversation about it, that's how you grow in your relationship. And it doesn't matter if it's work, school, church, home, or whatever. Conversation is the root of that. That's how you start to move forward. And some people may not call that justice, but it is a form of continuation. We can grow as people because of that.
Very much, yeah. On the topic of justice, I would say I think we can agree that nobody has the right to steal. Of course, that is a law, but we don't have the right to steal others' opinions of other people. We don't have the right to rob them of forming, their own just image of somebody or a situation. And we kind of do that when we go around other people's backs, gossiping or complaining, and instead of just going forward and saying, hey, I have a little problem with you. It calls to mind to me a situation wherein somebody had the dignity to come up and call me out as a person. And I really appreciated that. Like, it astronomically helped me to become a better person. When I was back in high school, I was back in the marching band. Some of you might do marching band. I was a section leader, and my co-section leader, she comes up to me in the middle of the band room one day. Like, we had a live audience right there. I'm not saying this was the appropriate time for her to do it, but she called me out straight to my face and told me that there were some things I needed to improve. And she didn't do it loudly. She didn't do it rudely. She just did it in a regular voice, just right there, right where I could hear her, and a couple other folks heard it too, but it wasn't this big nasty deal. No one else knew that she had those feelings, and no one else needed to, fester it, because I took it right there and I said, you're right, I could improve on those things. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't putting on a show when I said that. I could have been, because it was a little embarrassing, but at the same time, it was like, she cares enough about me as a person to talk to me, to tell me what she's thinking, instead of playing a mind game and just hoping I'll change, or talking to others and making me look bad in their sight. It's far more respectable to do that, to not fester other people's opinions of a person or ruin their image behind their back because you have a frustration with them. With communication, it would be a more just society, it would be a more merciful society, and it would be a lot better functioning society if we did have the accountability and the dignity to just speak to the people the things that we need to say, that we're feeling, have that communication, be willing to listen, of course, but, you know, stop all this backsiding, back-talking nonsense. Just go to the source and fix it.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So it might seem kind of random in there that there is that medicine label reference that you have been prescribed this medication because your doctor believes the benefits outweigh the potential side effects. Use as directed. One might look at that and be like, well, what do you mean by ethics speaks as that? For one, informed consent is, yes, you have been prescribed medications, or you've been given this direction, you've been given this course from your boss, you've been given this assignment at school. Why? Because the person above you believes that it's going to benefit you. Now, the irony of me putting that in there is that sometimes we have to question that. Yes, we have that information given to us that it is deemed as in our benefit, but, having gastrointestinal issues myself and other folks having healthcare issues, that sometimes you're given a medication that says that, and it's not even that a lot of consideration was given into whether or not the side effects, are outweighed by the benefits, so much as maybe the doctor is trying to find which medication does or doesn't work, so we're doing a trial and error thing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that actually exacerbates the condition itself. I've experienced that many times. Nevertheless, because it is informed consent, it is just, it is ethical. But me as a patient, I kind of just take it for granted and I take the pill. And, how many of us, we listen to instructions that are given instead of doing our own research, instead of really giving it a lot of thoughts, we just say, yeah, just give me that. Let me try it. Let's just try it and see if it works. And, sometimes when we do that, the side effects end up being something that not only worsens it, but makes things permanently worse. Mm-hmm. There's so much that we take for granted without giving it much thought. And so that's kind of what I put in there, is for us to kind of reflect on whether or not something is ethical doesn't necessarily mean that you should just do it. Just take it. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It just, what I'm getting at is, are you considering closely that you have a choice here, and that choosing not to sometimes is still just as ethical as choosing to go forward with something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously, if somebody takes that with too much face value, they'll say, well, you're saying not to take my medicine? Saying, no, don't take your medicine without doing a little bit of research. Obviously, doctors are professionals, and the analogy is to help us understand that if we do everything that somebody with more authority tells us to do, it can lead to a lot of issues if we're not considering what impact it has on us or on others. Sure, for the most part, most people are just sheep that follow, and sometimes the things that we're asked to follow are good. Obviously, it shouldn't take very much to have to consider whether or not stealing is unethical or wrong. Yeah. But there are some instances where, there are certain things where there's a bit of nuance, and people need to really consider if this is the right thing for me. One example I would say is, I'm not a college graduate and I didn't go to college. For me, that's worked out way better than all of my peers who I'm working with side by side. Not to say that college is not valuable, but for what I'm doing right now, I don't need to go $40,000, $50,000 in debt or more in order to learn the types of things that I'm learning and do the types of things that I'm doing with my career professionally, and also just in my spare time. And, having that shoved down your throat your entire life can make it really easy to just go with it without really taking advantage of it. See, if I were to go to college now, I know how I would do it. I know why I would do it, versus if I were to go when I first got out of high school and everyone was kind of, expecting me to do so. It takes a lot more consideration and like exploration. And I think people aren't really exploring a lot of the ideas that are presented to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. You know, we're not telling people not to take their medication. We're telling people to look at what people are asking you to do and just consider it. Because if you consider something before you do it, then your choice is not only your choice, but it's a choice that you're hopefully more informed upon when you actually do that.
Exactly, precisely that. And, you know, because so many of us do get pressured into, well, we believe that we're being told to do something and we go ahead and do it, we then end up in this little blame game. Like, there's this social blame game where, you know, everyone hates doctors, everyone hates hospitals. We're blaming the, you know, the justice system because of XYZ that happened when we did what they said and it didn't work out. Like, we like to play the blame game instead of being accountable for the fact that, yes, we had a choice in there, even though we didn't necessarily take the time to perceive that there was a choice. There is rarely ever a circumstance in life wherein you do not have a choice. But unless it's spelled out black and white before you, you may not perceive that choice. And that's nobody else's fault. Sometimes we're ignorant of those things. And so, yes, there is, you know, we're at fault, but not because of anything malicious that we intended to do. But a lot of times it's not ignorance at all. It's just arrogance of, you know, not taking the time to stop and think. In this fast-paced society, we would do well to kind of slow down and take that time to really consider through, you know, is this something that's going to scam me? Is this something that's actually going to lead to my benefit? Is this really what I want, or am I just taking it because I'm desperate right now? You know, some people will take jobs right away because it's, you know, they need the money, or they'll take, you know, they'll get into dealing drugs because they need the money. Just something is pressuring you to stop considering that you have a choice and there's other avenues. And where does the accountability lie? Does it lie on that person that gave you that thing or told you to do that thing? No. It's still on you. If it was made in ignorance, of course, that's a little less punitive than if it's done just because you deliberately decided not to take the time to think it through. But the point being, we can't blame those who give us instructions for things not working out. Like, I used to be in a dental hygiene school. I was dismissed because of I missed 2 points off a grade. 2 points. I did everything the instructor told me to do. I had felt she was promising me that if I did all these things that she asked, that I would get the extra credit, that I would pass the grade. And I did all those things. I busted everything I had out, and it did not work out. And I could be mad at her, and I could blame her for it, but, you know, it wasn't her fault. And it, you know, some of it was my fault, some of it wasn't. Some of it just is reality of situations happen that just don't work out. Medications happen that don't work out. Grades might not work out. This job might not work out. A friendship, a relationship that you have might not work out. And that's fine. We don't have to play the blame game. We can just look at, you know, what choices did I make? What choices did they make? Where are things really? And just kind of be accountable for taking care of yourself from that point.
Yeah, I mean, that makes me, I've have more thoughts if I can bring them out. So, yeah, I think quite often there's a lot of, see if I can find the words to say. I feel like I'm having a stupor of thought, so maybe we continue on.
Okay. You let me know when it comes back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't read this part, but it is something that I kind of want to touch on. It's the very end of the last paragraph that I started reading. Azure's contemplating. Her thoughts are digressing at this point, which whenever I put that in the book, it just means give this more thought. But she says, perhaps in consideration of this, one might say that the law represented justice, while public policy aimed to bring about mercy. Nonprofits and social support societies certainly played their parts in facilitating such processes. So there is, that standpoint that, yes, the law is hard, cold justice, punitive justice, nonprofits, programs, those are all mercy. But the reason that there's that ... consider this digression happening in her thoughts is because the opposite is also arguable. The justice system is also very merciful. Nonprofits are also out there for justice. Like both parties, nonprofits, politics, our policies, our laws, all of these things that are institutionalized around us have some intention of bringing about justice and mercy simultaneously. And we don't do well to kind of divide them and consider one aspect and the other, completely the other. Justice and mercy always go hand in hand. So while I was contemplating that, I was like, there are a lot of nonprofits that are literally like made for justice, like the AJC, SPLC, NAACP. There's also nonprofits like the American Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders that are completely aimed at mercy. So we see those counterparts in society, and then we see, our justice system, which some describe as not being very just. Yes, does there need to be reform in there? That may be the opinion, that may not be the opinion. I'm not going to specify a specific political opinion right now, but I guess what I'm getting at there is who do we look at as exacting justice versus mercy, or do we see them as, two parts of the same coin?
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad in a lot. There's good and bad for, all the different policies, whether it's political or even just private companies, things like that. There are certain things that have been kept alive that are helpful, and there's certain things that we kept alive that probably should find some reform. I think the problem is people aren't willing to talk about those differences. They're not willing to budge on certain points of reform, and there's also certain points of reform that maybe aren't so helpful, that people need a little bit more time to consider. And so when it comes to things like that, there's good and evil in a little bit of everything, and some people have a really hard time coping with that, as well as the fact that not everything that we do, not everything that we try to initiate, whether it's in government or personal life, has much purpose. There's a lot of purposeless stuff that we do, whether it's on social media or in going out and doing things. I mean, there's a lot of social activity that is both good, bad, and also just in the middle row. It doesn't really matter too much whether or not you engage in it. I think certain aspects of life are just meant to be mundane to help us go out and explore and find more to do and more to experience. But I also think there's things that are, exotic and interesting to experience for our own growth and learning. I think there are many things that happen to us that are not good, that if they didn't happen to us, we wouldn't find very much growth. And as distressing as life is, if it wasn't distressing, it would be boring, and we would create our own distress, as we tend to do already. And there are many things that, people have a hard time coping with. And I think being able to have discussions like this with other people, be able to say, you know what, this is bothering me, this thing that's going on in the world right now. Well, if you can have an honest discussion with someone who maybe has a differing opinion or the same opinion, as long as you can get different ideas out along the way as you're exploring things, then you can become a more well-rounded individual that's not super angry. The thing is, if you wallow in your own echo chamber, eventually you'll just find more and more stuff to be angry about, rather than find things to be invested in.
Mm-hmm. Precisely, yeah. There's a lot of problems arise when we're constantly making things so black and white instead of looking them as being, part of each other. Mm-hmm. Honesty kind of brings us full circle in this conversation. Is you know, everyone has the right to live an honest life, to seek justice, to give mercy, to, you know, share the truth, to communicate with each other. Everyone has the right to be honest. Nobody has the right to be dishonest. That's neither merciful, it's neither just. And if we would just be honest with one another, honest with ourselves first and foremost, it would be a much more peaceable society. Because, yeah, like, so many of us wallow in our anger. We don't like to admit that we're wrong. We don't even like to admit to ourselves that we might be wrong. You know, negative feelings are hard to deal with. They're very hard to deal with. And that's what we kind of base our reality off of, our feelings, when reality is more than our feelings. Feelings are chemical messengers shooting around our bodies. Like, those change on a dime, on a, you know, shift of a hormone level based off things you eat, how much sleep you have, your health status, your mental health status. Like, feelings come and go, but, you know, being honest can clear out a lot of pain from those feelings that we might be having within ourselves. It can prevent a lot of pain that could come in between relationships. It can, you know, heal a lot of hearts sooner. Take that thorn out that I kind of talked about, like, rip the thorn out, let the healing begin, because the sooner that we're honest and we stand for what's right, we let out the obscured justice that we're keeping within us, the sooner the healing can begin in society.
Yeah. And, you know, it's been described in many ways that negativity is a poison. If you hold on to negative feelings towards someone, yourself, etc., you know, pretty much anything, serious negativity will slowly degrade not only your mental health, but your physical health, because you become so vitriolically upset about anything, and it's just anything will start to set you off, and you'll become a much more bittered person. And there are times where I felt like little things have piled up, and I've allowed that anger to build up, and then all of a sudden anything can make me just want to punch something or explode on someone. But that's not how we're supposed to act. That's not how we're supposed to feel. You know, sure, it may feel like it has no consequence to you know, scream and yell at someone in my car who's never going to know that they cut me off and that it was that big of a deal.
Don't we all do that sometimes?
Yeah, exactly, though. You might think it's not that big of a deal that I just blew up on that person. I let out my anger and now I'm fine. But if I'm able to realign my emotions and find myself in a healthier mode when little things like that start to build up, I can de-escalate myself or someone else, which is really important, to be able to de-escalate a situation and find myself in a healthier communication with myself or with others. Then at the end of the day, I can go home a lot less stressed, and I also am not prone to exploding on people. You know, if I can de-escalate myself or someone else, then there isn't an explosion that happens at the end. The fuse fizzles out instead of turning into something way more than what we ever intended. And so, while it may seem like it's not a big deal, like, oh, I'm just doing this to myself, there are some real consequences to taking a certain type of behavior. Even if you say it's only private, take this behavior and you do it enough times, it'll start to come out in not so private settings, and then it becomes a part of you, and it becomes a part of the people you interact with, and it spreads. But that's the glory of it, is you can really start to take the negativity, and if you can harness that and dissipate it and be able to say, this is no longer part of me, and then you switch it around and turn to positivity, that same thing can happen. You can have this huge domino effect of positive or negative. So being able to recognize and harness that negativity, and, you know, dispelling it, finding your almost like Zen state. I don't know, but some people would call it all sorts of things. But I guess, for lack of a better term, you know, finding that state of flow where you're able to let things go, realign yourself, and then focus back in the moment. And you can turn that into a positive rather than letting it explode into something drastically negative. That becomes a positive skill. a very useful one that you can use for all sorts of things.
Yeah, yep. And again, that touches right back onto our first point, is the little things that we obscure. Anything hidden is going to come out eventually, and the sooner it comes out, the better off you are. The sooner you get rid of what's bad that's hidden, the better off you are. The sooner you reveal the good that's hidden in you, likewise, the better off you are, and the better off others are. So I guess just in closing, I'd invite all of us, everybody who's listening, to kind of just take a little look at yourself, kind of consider how incredible you are, how much power you have, how much choice you have in just everything, from the little things to the big things. Like, we are incredible beings, and we have such an influence on one another. We have such a, I guess, mandatory calling to protect one another, not by tiptoeing around one another, not by, trying to control one another by any sort of means, but instead, like, we have so much power to be able to allow healing to begin in the society through honesty, to being upfront, to mastering good communication skills. If we can be honest with ourselves, and we can, get our lives in a place where we're living authentically, we're living peaceably within ourselves, peaceably with those around us, then we can do a whole lot of good for everyone else. And it's a little micro factor that kind of, like you're saying, it domino effects out. It can change, households. It can change communities. It can change organizations. It can change policies. It can change the systems within a country and the country itself. So just in reflecting on those sort of things this week, when we consider justice, mercy, obscuring truth, and honesty, I hope that you can find something within yourself that is positive, worthwhile, and seek to bring it out in an authentic way. And if there's anything in your life that, is like that thorn twisting in your side or causing pain to others that you might not see, maybe now is the time to be brave and to confront it, to bring it out so that that healing can begin. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. Please subscribe. Follow us for more. Get to my website. Yep, and be sure to check out my husband's channel for a whole lot of gaming fun.